amazed at what I am. I say what I think, that the company stinks. Yes, I'm a union man. When we meet in the local hall, I'll be voting them all. With a hell of a shout, it's out, and the rise of the factories fall.
Right. We've heard how none of the consultants contacted the coroner or the coroner's office about any suspicions about Letby, or even any suspicions about anyone causing malfeasance or unnatural deaths in the babies. And one of the commenters, I think it was A Cup of Tea with Poetry, asked, did they contact the union, their union reps at all? Did the consultants contact the union reps? Well, in this meeting that they got called into the headmaster's office for, with Tony Chambers and Ian Harvey, the directors arranged for the consultants to have with them a union rep, and that is a Mr. Ty, and he gave him a very short briefing as to what was going on about a grievance with Letby over name calling. And let's have a little read. We'll hear from Mr. Ty. So Mr. Ty was sat in that meeting, and there was an issue over alleged negative remarks that Ms. Letby had accused some of the consultant paediatricians of making, and that if those allegations were to be upheld, those would be considered professional misconduct. It has to be said, however, that the paediatricians vigorously denied ever making, and stop there please, says Langdale, not quite sure why. Sorry to interrupt. And then he says, and also it is also that one of the, or some of the relatives had threatened to refer some or one of the paediatricians to the General Medical Council. And we're not talking about the parents of Letby, the parents of the children that had threatened GMC action. And Mr. Ty rep says, I wasn't aware that Ms. Letby or the father had threatened to do so, although he says he might not be remembering correctly. So what did Mr. Ty think of this meeting? Bearing in mind he's going to be representing the consultants. So in this meeting, they actually read out Lucy Letby's letter following the grievance, and he says he thought it was completely inappropriate to hear a 20-minute melodramatic dissertation from Ms. Letby. And he said that the consultants completely denied that they had said anything derogatory. However, they did recognise that members of their team may possibly have said that. All right, okay, pass it down the line. I mean, they're used to doing that, aren't they? Blaming the minions. So, after the actual meeting, so Mr. Ty hadn't really had any dealings with these consultants. After the actual meeting on the 26th, I met after in the corridor with Dr. J. Oram and Dr. Brewery to express my surprise and shock as to what we had just both witnessed, and my deep concern for them and the position they were in, and this particular conflict with the trust. And this request to apologise for something they firmly confirmed they had nothing that they had firmly denied. And so I had said to them, look, there's nothing to be lost by making a reserved apology for perceived hurt, and it's not going to do any harm, and it still leaves you complete freedom to proceed in any direction you want to go as your union representative. But ultimately, the trust want to let Ms. Letby back to work. What do you think about that? And they said, under no circumstances, that is completely impossible. That is our bottom line, and we cannot have that. Now, he says, in his view, my consultant colleagues had done absolutely nothing wrong, and in fact, quite the opposite, were proceeding in an extraordinarily professional and courageous manner. He was very disturbed by the meeting itself, but subsequently the meeting with Dr. Jayaram in his office, so the next day he had a meeting with Dr. Jayaram where he went into further detail, and don't forget I knew very little about this until Dr. Jayaram, one-to-one with Jayaram, sat me down and told me all about what had been going on with the old So I then went home and did some research. Yes, my research was extremely disturbing, and I wrote a letter that you no doubt are going to refer to, and no doubt I am going to refer to this letter. Now, I've said a couple of times that the questioning of in Thirlwell gets quite irritating. It's Langdale questioning Mr. Tighe, and I want to know the answer to this question. We'll get to it in a sec. Also, incidentally, there was talk of Ms. Letby being moved to Alderhay, so I was actually concerned that if that were to occur, we still had a major responsibility to prevent that happening. So they didn't even want her doing that. So let's take a look at this letter. And he says he found it extremely concerning, and he's done some background reading, and there are disturbing similarities with the Beverly Allitt case and others. Now my question is, was it, I take it must have been Dr. Jayaram who said to him, listen, do you know this Beverly Allitt woman, she injected insulin, and also she injected air. So I'm assuming he didn't see. This is what annoyed me about the question. Langdale never asks him about that, and what he instructs, this is what Mr. Tighe instructs the consultants to do. If you believe that a full forensic examination must take place, this has not been adequately carried out, and this can probably only be done properly by the coroner and the police. If they refuse to refer to the coroner or police, you will need to consider informing the coroner formally about your concerns. Request him to open inquests and ask him to inform the police ask the coroner to inform the police if he thinks it's appropriate. Now then, where he says open inquests, now that would mean they would have to answer questions at an inquiry, especially after Dr. Brewery and the baby O. So that gets a little bit awkward. So Langdale does sort of ask, you said I've done some background reading about similarities with Beverly Allitt, so you were aware of the case, And he says, I was aware of the case, yes, I read it up. So it's not quite clear. By the way, it sounds like J.R. Abrams said to him about Allitt and how Beverly Allitt injected insulin in air. And he goes on to say, I was concerned that although I wasn't aware of the full details, I was highly suspicious that the Royal College report had not been properly briefed about the concerns of the paediatricians. But it turns out that they did look into it, those issues, and it was part of the redacted part of the report. And now this is something interesting that the union rep mentions, talking about if they suspected anything criminal after he'd done research into Beverly Allitt and Harold Shipman. One of the recommendations was that a full toxicology is carried out on every autopsy, and he says, but it was obvious that they had not tested for unusual drugs, otherwise they would have an answer. So that is a good point. Okay, we haven't heard any reports of Letby injecting, of them alleging that Letby injected any unusual drugs. But if they really even suspected her of doing anything, wouldn't they at least scan and do a toxicology test on some of the blood for some unusual drugs? But they didn't even suspect it that much. So Mr. Tighe goes on to say, I had confidence in the coroner and the coroner's service. Forensic detailed investigation that the coroner would also see that and would take action, and if necessary would then refer to the police. It seemed to me that was the process that we should go through. I was, however, well not aware that the coroner, I'm not sure if it's this time or later, the coroner had actually been extremely dismissive and had said that this was not in his jurisdiction. Well, Langdale says, we haven't heard evidence about that. She asked, did you at any point with the paediatricians discuss that they might go directly to the police if they had these concerns, or indeed you might go directly to the police, one of you, someone? Well, yes, that was part of the conversation I had with Dr. J.R. on the morning on the Friday the 27th. We did discuss that, and my feeling was that we should go to the coroner first. I had confidence in the coroner. I felt it was the coroner first and the police after. So did they contact the coroner? Spoiler alert, they did not. Now, so he recommended that Mr. Tighe recommended that the consultants write to the board requesting these things. I'll put a link to this letter later. And here is a letter that was sent to Ravi to say the coroner, so to Ravi from Tony Chambers. The coroner was fully briefed on all matters. Met with the coroner yesterday when a copy of your letter was passed to him. For sake of clarity, the coroner was aware of the details and concerns you expressed to the reviewers. It's now clearly a matter for the coroner to decide what action he may or may not take. And here's Mr. Tighe's next letter. I'm slightly surprised and pleased that the Trust has so rapidly escalated your concerns verbatim to the coroner. The ball is now firmly in the coroner's court. I suggest you wait a response from him. If there is no response, I still don't think you need to do anything. I am informed that there are 3 inquests still to be completed. Ixnay on the inquest way! If this is the case, I assume that some of you will be invited to give evidence. If so, you should state your concerns in public, if you still have any, and clarify that you did not make allegations against any. It says you should respond to the letter saying, clarifying that you did not make allegations against any specific individual, even though they did. But you will. This is what he recommends, that you will accept the guidance of the coroner. Enclosed, a draft letter of reserved apology to the nurse concerned that addresses the possibility of inappropriate comments being made, emphasising that if they occurred, they were probably not directed at a specific individual, but were vocalising anxiety in the heat of the moment, with minimal information and patient safety as the core motivation. Best of luck. So there was their Brad. They thought they had a new friend, a new member of the gang, and no, you're not on our side anymore. And I'm just going to finish here. But I felt it was the coroner first and the police after. I felt the natural approach here was to encourage the trust to go through the proper channels and do it themselves as soon as possible. We had time. We had plenty of time with Letby being on leave. And did they go to the coroner? No. It was a coronary bypass, which actually is it could be the source of the whole problem. They bypassed the coroner's office. This could be how we got into the position that we're in.